Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The Finnish fighter Robert Helenius will stand in at 4 days' notice and face Anthony Joshua on August the 12th at the O2 in London to help save the card that Joshua is headlining. Of course, we know Dillian Whyte was chucked off the card after failing a drug test ahead of what would have been probably one of the final big paydays of his career. Not to be for him, but Helenius, who's just come off a fight at the weekend, which we'll talk about in a moment, jumps onto the card, and he was one of a number of fighters, including Derek Chisora, Gerald Washington, Dempsey McKean, a few others put their hand up as well that were in the running for the fight. And Helenius, not for the first time, has stepped in at short notice for a matchroom card. Did the same in 2017, and that was to face Dillian Whyte, ironically. So that was 2 weeks' notice. He's cutting it down to 4. And Joshua, not for the first time, having a relatively short notice opponent. 12 days for Carlos Takam. What was it, the back end of 2018, I believe it was. Also, you had that situation with Andy Ruiz Jr. So Joshua in kind of familiar territory, but also couple of red flags potentially with short notice, but we'll come to that. First, the press release. So you can see here on screen, you've got the promo poster updated with Helenius in it. 4 heavyweight fights on the card. Hrgovic, McKean, Chisora, Washington, Fisher, Armstrong. We'll touch on that briefly later. So, as the press release says, Helenius steps in to face Anthony Joshua at the O2. What we'll do is we'll cut down to the quotes, but first I just need to mention this will not now be a pay-per-view. It will just be part of the regular DAZN subscription. And I guess with the situation with Whyte and Helenius, who's coming off a knockout loss to Deontay Wilder at the end of last year, not necessarily being the guy that fans were begging to see, I guess it made sense, and they must have crunched the numbers and done the sums and gone, okay, we can't justify this being on pay-per-view. Good news for fans. I think overall, Joshua versus Helenius with Hrgovic, Chisora on the card, Johnny Fisher, an up-and-coming heavyweight as well. That's good value for the price of the subscription. I think people would have been raging, absolutely raging, if they had tried to keep it on pay-per-view. And I guess that shows how Joshua's fallen off a little bit since 2016, because you had Eric Molina at that time with Joshua, and I think that was also late notice to some degree, wasn't it, as well? You had Molina and Joshua, which was a pay-per-view. So Joshua with some losses in recent years, and also a little bit of vulnerability and question marks about his mentality. Is his head really in the game? His value has sort of dropped, and they've obviously decided they can't push it to pay-per-view. I mean, good for fans, that's for sure. I'll be enjoying this card. Heavyweight channel with 4 heavyweight fights. I will be enjoying it. So in terms of Robert Helenius, he says, I'm excited about fighting Anthony Joshua on August 12th. I'm a true Viking that is willing to face any challenge at a moment's notice. This is not an opportunity I was going to let slip away. I plan to make the most of it. And I guess part of it as well probably came down to he might have been willing to take the lowest amount that was offered to various fighters. I'm sure they were in discussions with different fighters on the undercard. Chisora, Gerald Washington. There was different fighters who said they were in the mix and camps calling things out on social media. But also you have to look at this from another perspective, the risk factor, but also who's he looking to face next, Deontay Wilder, and we'll come to that in a moment. Joshua says this wasn't in the script. I respect Helenius, and may I say, I respect any male or female who steps into the ring. I am laser focused on the win. I can make steps forward to bigger and better things, but the roadmap has a checkpoint. Saturday night, may the best man win. And I guess there's a couple of things here, because Joshua hasn't fought anyone this tall since Dominic Breazeale back in 2016. So it's been a while between drinks in terms of the tall fighters. Sometimes against the shorter fighters, he struggled a little bit. Didn't look great against Carlos Takam, who's closer to 6 foot. Didn't obviously against Andy Ruiz Jr. fare well in that first fight. So sometimes the smaller fighters haven't helped Joshua in some of the way that he likes to fight. And in Helenius, he's got a guy who's similar dimensions to Deontay Wilder. So you could look at it from that perspective and go, if they are truly going to face Wilder next, someone who's 6'7", similar dimensions, and Helenius can also punch a bit, that is not terrible. to face that sort of opponent, especially when you consider it's at 1 week's notice, or less, I should say, 4 days notice. We kind of just have to take this and go, it is what it is. I know some people won't be happy, but the fact it's not on pay-per-view, it's going to help the situation. So Joshua, short notice opponent again, but you have to go also with Helenius, who can punch. Is there the smell of an upset in the air because he's trained for someone different? Dillian Whyte and Robert Helenius don't really fight the same. Robert Helenius, big, tall, uses the jab, got a decent right hand, but he's also quite stiff and upright. Dillian Whyte, more sort of a bit of a slugger, can be quite wild. It was going to be a different sort of fight. So you have to credit Joshua for taking this opponent at short notice, because maybe he could have said, look, I will just, step aside and go straight into a Wilder fight and just, not have the card. But I guess financial considerations may have come into play, because Matchroom and DAZN would have taken an absolute bath if there was no card. And it would be hard to sort of have Hrgović or McKean or Chisora versus Washington as the headliner and expect it to really do the sort of numbers or be a subscriber driver. As it is, Joshua doesn't really fight very often. This will be the first time in a few years that it's 2 fights in a year sort of thing. So, we have to take what we can get, I guess. Joshua, he's looking to work his way back up. Helenius is the first obstacle in his path. But is the woof of an upset in the air here? Is this a potential banana skin? Joshua, his chin, where's it at? Where's the mindset at? Will he be distracted by what's happened? Will all these factors coalesce for something to sort of go awry on the night? Remember, it's boxing after all. It's the theatre of the unexpected. You could have a situation perhaps that Helenius just lands and all of a sudden Joshua is folded and it's good night. It's all she wrote. And maybe Joshua disappears off into the sunset. But Joshua should win this one. He is the favourite. He is the fighter that you would say, based off the skill set, the resume. Robert Helenius is 39 years old now. We've just seen him this past weekend, and do go check out the video that I did, the post-fight review of his fight with Mika Mielanen. That was a case where Robert Helenius looked just, so-so. It was a comeback fight after the Wilder loss. He was getting touched up with the jab a bit. He didn't really seem deterred. There was one hook that sort of caught him, and maybe he was wobbled momentarily, but ultimately he landed the hammer, the right hand, and stopped Mielanen in the 3rd round. So check it out. There are some highlights of the fight in that video, that post-fight review. In that video, I said Helenius could be an option. Remember, he's also coming off a camp. He's just, been preparing for this tune-up. So he is ready. He is in shape. So, he shouldn't have to, it's not like he's climbing off the couch. So there are some factors in his favor that he's not starting from zero. He's got a few, rounds under his belt just from the other day, and obviously a camp under his belt, and he steps straight into this one. So Robert Helenius gets the fight. He will just be, it's all upside for him. There's no real downside. I'm sure he's getting paid handsomely, especially after what he got last week. I remember in the comments of that video, someone said he might be able to make $100,000 in another fight at some point. I think he'll get significantly more than that for this one. And this is the sort of Johnny on the spot moment. He's taken the opportunity, all upside. Even if he goes in there and goes down swinging and tries to just land something on Joshua and be aggressive, and he could make something happen. For Joshua, with his new trainer, Derek James, I'm sure James wanted the fight to continue. They've been grafting away there in Texas. Obviously, James is trying to adapt some of his techniques and style into Joshua's game, and we'll potentially see a little bit more of the wrinkles that they're able to develop in camp. I'm sure Joshua's going to be heavy on the fundamentals. He'll be looking to use the jab, but I think a lot of people want to see what he can do against a big man if he's going to be facing a big man next. But we have to also be realistic. The risk with this one is much less than it would be for a Wilder. So it might be the same height and dimensions, but the risk factor is much lower, and Helenius quite long in the tooth, almost 40. But at 4 days notice, it is what it is, and it's better than the Chisora fight. I know Chisora, and obviously David Haye must have been, lying on Chisora's behalf or saying that it was all a done deal. Clearly not. And I think a lot of people would have been disappointed if Chisora would have been the guy that was picked. And also Eddie Hearn had called for Chisora to retire not so long ago, so it would have been a tough sell. But Helenius, Joshua, short notice. You've got Hrgovic, McKean, and Chisora in Washington, Fisher and Armstrong. Not bad fights. I think, you have to look at Washington and Chisora and go, both of those guys are pretty washed at this point. But Washington's a puncher and Chisora will give it everything. It could be highly competitive, or it could be all over and around. Either way. Hrgovic, he should stop McKean in my view, and Fisher, he's going for the Southern Area title. Situation against Harry Armstrong. It's matchmaking at a certain point in his career. He should get the W and take home that piece of hardware from that fight. But, it is what it is. The card has been, I guess, rescued by Helenius coming in. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter. Boxing_squared. I'm out.